east of the sun and west of the moon, dear. East of the sun and west of the moon.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, Staten Island, and welcome to the Al Lambert Show. The Al Lambert Show is always about people who help people, and it's also a lot to do with live music. It even morphed into writers. I've had many writers on the show, but it's mostly people who help people. And the show is always dedicated to my mom and dad, and my dad, who had a show here in the 80s, 90s, gave me a little taste of this, and we worked together on the Dom Lambert Show. So, Dad, I hope you're watching. I have with me today, I have three terrific guests. My first guest is Donna Long. Hi, Donna.
Hi, Al. How are you?
Before we start, I want to just mention how I've known your husband. Mm-hmm. Well, I've known you through Jeff, but known your husband since he was a young guy. And I mentioned in our prep that he was never short.
Never short.
Never short.
Goes with his name, Long.
That's
and
true.
There you go.
Oh, that's very good. Yeah, that's very good. They're all tall.
All tall.
Yeah, I haven't seen David in years. Is David tall?
Not as tall. He's a little shorter, maybe 6 foot.
Right.
As opposed to 6'3" and 4.
Right. Isn't that funny? Yeah, they're all tall. Even Cindy.
Cindy, right.
Well, Cindy was a swimmer. Right. She was a great swimmer in her day. Well, they belonged to Hillside.
Hillside, right.
When they were kids, and I guess they all swam. I know Cindy was a champion. I mean, she was like amazing.
Yeah.
She was in the paper all the time, and I wonder if I always get a chance to see her sometimes when she comes home, you know. And I haven't seen her in a while, but we're on Facebook once in a while together, you know. I don't know if she still swims, but she was a good kid. Anyway.
Yes.
So you and I have things in common, you know, and that is that you have such a vast career with the developmentally disabled. And being that I worked at Willowbrook all those years, I have such a feel for that, you know. My intense, when I taught at Willowbrook, we're not going to repeat exactly what we did in prep, but when I taught at Willowbrook, I had 6 years of dealing with thousands of special people. It was intense. And because it was institutionalized, obviously it was different. You didn't have much parental involvement.
Sure.
But it was probably the greatest learning experience in my life. And each day I felt that I accomplished something. You know,
you felt good about what you were doing, I'm sure.
There was a feeling that I never ever got before. I mean, don't get me wrong, when you perform, you can get a charge. People clap for you. People don't clap for you on your everyday job.
Right.
So performing has its ups, but nothing like working with the special kids.
You know, I used to tell interns when they would come to the agency that I was at that they will be so rewarded in doing what they're doing. They will get so much out of it.
Right.
And you know, many, as a result, didn't think that, but then they went on to pursue it as a career and go into the field of special ed teachers, speech therapists, occupational, etc. And I think because the individuals make such an impact on us that, you know, makes you feel good, but you're learning so much from them. Every second you're learning because they just, you know, they're inspiring.
They are inspiring.
They're inspiring.
Well, they are so positive. You know, it's just totally amazing. You have an autistic daughter.
I do, yes.
Right? And how old is she now?
She's 40 years old.
Okay, she's 40 years old. And now, years ago, they didn't even leave the kids at home. There were very few people, that had special kids. They all were, a lot of them were institutionalized.
She was born after Willowbrook. She's 78. She was born, and at that time was when
right
things
here.
were
Things were changing.
And and thank God that happened. Thank God that happened, and hence the agencies came to fruition in community residences,
particularly on Staten.
Programs, etc., because the need was great.
Where were you going to put 6,000 kids?
Where were these individuals going to go?
Right.
And it was the hell that they lived through. Now was the time to give them a much better quality of life.
Make this right.
Let's make this right. Make it right, for sure.
Well, the Willowbrook Consent Decree. I don't know if you ever heard the term, but it was Willowbrook was supposed to close in 1975.
75, right.
And then they realized it wasn't, and they moved it to 77 or something, and then they realized, I don't think it didn't close till 85 or 86.
Yeah.
Because they wanted to close it, but they had no idea where to put them.
Right.
So I think, just for my own, that Staten Island per capita may have the most services for special people simply because Willowbrook was here.
We
per capita.
Right. And thankfully we do. Thankfully we do.
And you've been involved smacking it.
I started to be involved when Janine was 2.5, so it's 37 and a half years.
Wow,
but things have changed, in that time. First of all, there wasn't so much of an awareness of autism back then. There also wasn't a spectrum back then where you could have different degrees of autism. But also, the positive thing back then was that programs were available. And we have programs available today, but there's a lot of cuts in services. There's residential has, they say it's still going on, but it's very little. It's very minimal. And so aging parents like Jeff and I, who have a 40-year-old daughter, what's the likelihood of her going into a community residence, because of the delay in development.
Right.
So it's the times are very challenging.
Right.
They become very challenging.
You have to now think beyond. I get that.
You have to think beyond, and you want to be part of that decision.
Right.
You want to be part of where your child's going, what agency, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. And you do cross-agency, which I had mentioned.
Yes, because Janine gets different services from different agencies, a day program, respite program, recreation program, and we do cross, as I mentioned, that I like the idea of it broadening her ability to have different networks of socialization and opportunities for socialization.
You're with Crossroads now. I failed to mention that.
I am now, I retired, so to speak, for a number of reasons, but I wanted to stay involved in the field. I felt it very important to stay involved, and because of the dynamics and the changing that's taken place and the transitioning of different services, I wanted to ensure that I knew what was going on and how this was going to impact not only my daughter, but the individuals that we all serve and we've all advocated for.
You've been in the game for so long on Staten Island, you know all the people in the play, so to speak.
You do, but you also, you want to introduce new people into it as well, because you want other people to take up the mantle of advocating as well.
Important.
It's very, very important because, I can't impress upon parents enough how their voice is critical in ensuring that their child gets the services that they need, deserve, and how that impacts their lives. And so you need to keep yourself educated, informed, and involved. It's very important, critical.
My father said that all the time about life. I wanted to mention that you mentioned the spectrum.
Yes.
And that's a term we never used years ago. Years ago, as I keep referring to the PrEP, the word retardation was the term used when to retard something means to slow it down. And I remember trying to teach one young man in those days how to tie his shoe, and it took 6 months, but eventually he learned.
Right.
So that's when the definition of the word retardation used at the time, sat in my brain. He learned maybe you just need 3 years to teach what would take 3 days. I started thinking about how this term came about and what did it really mean, as opposed to the derogatory word, you're retarded, which I always hated. Then the word moron, idiot, imbecile were terms used to describe degrees of retardation in those days, later on abused by lay people in the everyday language. I didn't know that either until I started teaching at Willowbrook, and I started seeing, they were asking me, well, do you think this kid is an imbecile or an idiot? And when I first heard the question, I referred to the manual, and I saw the ways that they described the kids. But it was the lay people that made the terms derogatory, because the people that were scientific within the structure and of the time were using these words to describe that, which is going to get me to my point. I think, only from my from looking, is that when they decided to change the word, they started using the word autism to start from, for want of a better word, the slowest, the most difficult child to get to the higher end. And I kind of think the word retardation was ridiculous to begin with, but now they've changed the category to degrees of autism.
Well,
am I anywhere in the world here with this?
Autism is a disability, but also you have individuals who are intellectually, developmentally disabled. So that could be mentally retarded. That could be.
Right. I know what you're saying.
But that's the terminology.
That's the terminology.
That's the terminology.
Do they still use it?
Intellectually, developmentally disabled?
No, mentally retarded.
No,
Never hear it. Right.
But people use it in a negative way.
Right.
Not that long ago, my daughter was getting on a van from program, and somebody opened their car window and yelled out, retard.
Are you kidding?
And
oh my God, I'm getting a sick feeling in my stomach.
I wasn't there to witness it, but
I am getting
when she came home, she was out of sorts, and she had trouble articulating. She couldn't articulate really what happened. And
That's
the program
disgusting.
director called to tell me what had transpired. And I then spoke to Janine about it to have her. And she was like very nervous about it. And then she said, I don't know why they said that to me. I don't know why they did that.
God, that is so
and,
bad. That's so terrible.
As a parent, as any parent would, first thing I said to the director was, did you get the license plate number? I was raised by cops, and you got the license plate number for everything. Everybody.
I know.
And so she said, I didn't think of that, And because I was ready to hunt this person down.
Right.
Because it's an affront to not just my child,
brutal. Today's
but
world?
all these individuals.
That's terrible.
And there's no need for it.
No need for
There's no need for it.
When I taught at Willowbrook, I had a chorus with special kids. It was the greatest, years of my life. And I used to take them on trips, but I would take them with 20 assistants. I had 55 people in that chorus.
Wow.
20 assistants, 3 buses. And we would sometimes go to Manhattan, and I took them to the Luchow's. We performed at the Hilton in front of 3,000 people in different
that's
places.
great.
It was an amazing
Yeah.
experience. We worked with some big stars in those days too. But people would come up to me when I had them on the ferry boat, and I had them, everybody strategically placed, all my assistant teachers and the other teachers. And then they would see when we all get up and we would walk from the ferry boat back to the buses and outside. People would come up and they would hand us money. They would cry, and they would get a hold of the teachers and go, "We can't believe, what you guys are doing." It was the most wonderful feeling that people, opposite of this lunatic that did bad things, was doing. They loved it, and that's part of the reward that you kind of felt that society recognized.
But you need society, the community, to focus on the abilities of the individuals and not the disabilities.
Absolutely.
Because
Positive.
if it were positive, if it was the ability, people wouldn't be like, "Oh, look at how they're singing."
Right.
It would be just the norm.
Just normal.
It'd be the norm, as it should be.
Right.
It shouldn't be different. I mean,
I agree.
When you were at Willowbrook, it was a different time where people were not as aware, and there wasn't so much knowledge.
Right.
But that's how we think of it now. It's you want people to focus on the ability, what they can do.
Well, that was the whole gist of what I did there. Was about I had harmony, I had 3-part harmony.
That's terrific.
It was an amazing moment in time. But I want to say 2 things. We have 5 minutes left. I had mentioned, and I'm going to mention it again, that I think the kids make the parents step up to the plate, even though they would have been great parents with quote-unquote normal people. The fact that they have a special person just makes their parenting just blossom, and vice versa. When it blossoms, then the child blossoms. Because I have a stepdaughter who is morphing right now into a stepson. Okay. And very high function, graduating college, works full time. I mean, astounding. And so I've personally witnessed my wife and the kind of mom that she is during these times. So I commend you. And Jeff, I know what you do. I know it.
Well, it is that they motivate us, they inspire us, they lead, and because of their innocence in their development, they teach. I learn from my daughter every day.
Yeah,
I learn from her every day. I wish I had the patience that she had. I wish I had half the compassion that she has. There's so many qualities that our individuals have that, it puts things in perspective. It definitely puts things in perspective. Like, I don't care. Somebody could be worried about a car that they have or the color of the car, whereby our individuals, they just have a smile and they're happy, and they bring light. And that is so important. One thing I just want to quickly go back to what you had talked about with teaching the individuals, and it took X amount of time to do it. In one of my roles years ago, we were told to cut out a lot of services, and the reasons being were that it cost too much money, and it takes 3 months to have somebody pour a glass of orange juice. And, I was, and this is somebody very big in the political arena, and it was such an affront to me, because if it takes forever, we still try. We still do it.
Absolutely.
So what?
There's
it
a
takes
song
3
about
months.
it.
You
so
just
what?
do it.
I agree.
You do it.
Well,
You do it.
that's what we were getting paid for.
Yeah.
It was beyond pay, but that's what your job is.
But you do it because you want to make an impact on this, and you want to make this person as independent as possible, to whatever degree that is.
And you want to make their lives better.
You want to, yes.
Give them a sense of accomplishment. Let's see the smile come back on the face, and
more importantly, a quality of life.
Quality
Let's
of
give
life.
them quality of life.
Now, your daughter met Derek Jeter. We got a minute and 60 seconds. So your daughter met Derek Jeter
on her 30th birthday.
Because she's a mega Yankee fan.
Huge Yankee fan. Only wears Yankee clothes. I mentioned she can't tell time, but she could tell you the stat of every Yankee player ever. And
at Yankee Stadium.
What do you mean?
That's where she met him.
Oh, at Yankee Stadium, in the clubhouse.
Oh my God!
And then she was in the dugout, and the players were coming over, and it was just a memorable
Did
day.
you get a film of that?
Yeah, we have a lot of the Advance covered it, and they did a big story on it. And
I wish I would have known that ahead of time. I would have said, bring a clip next time.
Yeah, it
next time.
was
If you do a show here, you got to.
And then quickly, then I guess when Derek Jeter was retiring, the Post contacted us because they were going to do a story on the 5 biggest Yankee fans, and Janine was one of them.
No
And they did a
kidding.
whole story
Now
on that.
That
Yeah.
is amazing. I
Amazing.
didn't know that. See, how did I miss that? I read the paper every day. Well,
Yeah.
you can go on vacation 2 days and all of a sudden 9 people
Right.
died.
Right, I know.
So I come back like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And I call you. If you're really into Staten Island and what's going on,
Right.
it's like
Right.
you got to every day check. So I miss that, Anyway, I'm going to say that I'm glad that we did this. I know Crossroads is great, and I'm sure you're doing great there.
Thank you.
And I'll see you at the event that they're having on
Yes,
September
September
23rd?
21st.
21st, okay.
Yes.
Crossroads.
Friday
Anybody
night.
interested in
Crossroads
helping us out?
Unlimited, Inc.
Right.
Yes.
Give us a little help. You can always contact me on Facebook. Donna Long. Thank you,
Thank you
Donna.
so much.
Great.
Thank you, Al. Appreciate it.
I'm glad you
Yeah.
came. So my next guest is a friend of mine for years. And it's funny. You were on the first show I ever did.
I
here
was on
as the Al Lambert show.
That's correct.
You were my first guest.
First guest.
Okay, and I don't even want to look at that show now.
Probably
I'm
not.
only kidding, Time has gone on.
But I watched the last show,
Right.
which is the show's on
Right,
YouTube now,
right,
which
right.
is wonderful.
Right, you can- right.
you can watch the YouTube episode.
little
So I
color
wore a
today.
little color today. I figured I'd spruce up a bit,
Well, the
because
famous line of the song is when you talk about that, and how did she look, and did she ask about me?
that's it.
Anyway,
So I'm happy to be back.
I'm happy to have you back.
I'm very happy to be
but
back.
so many things have happened in your life. All the credit in the world for, at this stage of your life, really doing what you've always loved. Because making a living, having your day career, day gig, is always, has to be done because you have bills, you have mortgages.
Right.
But sometimes getting in a position in life when you say, something, I may have this opportunity to make some shekels, but still do what I like.
Right.
So you've taken that to another level, and you've used technology, and
this is
we're going to talk about where you are now.
This is the thing I think that has amazed me the most in the last 3 years. I really started. I made the decision in 2015 that I was going to now approach acting and performing as my primary business.
Right.
And I've been doing it for 40 years, but
Right.
it was never my primary
Right.
business.
Right.
It was, and that word is so, and we always laugh about the business of show.
The business of
The
show.
business of show. Well, now you have to approach it as a business. Well, the first thing I learned, and it's funny because I did an interview with Ken Torado recently, and he said to me, he goes, how did you make that change? And he wanted to say, at your age, but he didn't. He said,
didn't.
at this stage of your
At
life,
this stage of your
how
life.
did you make that change? And what is shocking to me, Al, is what has happened in the technology. And you mentioned technology because what has happened is so far removed from
what it was.
Especially
You can
when we
move
were
quicker
breaking
now.
into the business.
Right.
Those days you got pictures made, you glued your resume to the back of the picture, and you made rounds. You would go knock on doors,
Pounding the
pounding the
pavement.
pavement. Now it's pounding the keyboard, or pounding the phone.
The phone, right. Absolutely.
And what is interesting, because I primarily was a stage actor. And, you're in a stage show, you go to rehearsals, and then the show opens, and the show runs, and then the show closes.
Right.
So, one of the first things that happened, I was very lucky, is I got cast in 2 stage shows, back to back, almost back to back,
Right.
when I decided to go back to do this. One of which you saw.
The one in the city.
We
One on
saw
42nd.
On 42nd Street.
Right.
And we did 5 performances a week there on 42nd Street. But then I did one where we did 8. Al,
I know.
8 a week.
I get it.
At this stage in
At
our
this
life.
stage of our lives.
is
I get it.
So I said, well, it would have to be a very special stage project for me. I want to do this movie and television stuff.
Right.
This is, the people who are good movie actors and the people who are good television actors may disagree with me, but it's a lot easier than it is doing a stage show. Going up on the stage for 3 hours.
Oh, you got to be at the top of your performance every day.
And you got to do the whole play. You have to memorize the whole book.
I agree.
Half the time you got to memorize everybody else's lines because they might forget. The film thing you do in small bites.
Right.
It's
You
a
could
big
study your
elephant.
line, right.
But how do you eat it? One bite at a time.
That's it. You could study your line just before you go on.
Right. And sometimes that's the only time you get the lines.
Right.
But what bothers me about this business is there are projects that I did 2 years ago that are just now coming to light. It's the delay.
Right, yeah.
It's the difference in. I get up this morning and I take out the tablet while you're having your coffee, and it goes to a news feed, and the news feed comes up and it says that a movie called "Can You Ever Forgive Me," starring Melissa McCarthy, very funny
Right, I know.
woman, but a very talented actress.
Lost a lot of weight recently.
She has is getting Oscar buzz. Now, I shot that movie with her 2 years ago, and now they're talking about it. It's never going to go to the theaters. It goes to, it's premiering in Telluride at a film festival.
And it still has Oscar buzz?
Well, now I'm learning. There are film festivals that are Oscar designated film if your film is in if your film is at Sundance,
right.
if your film is at the Cannes Film Festival, if your film is in Telluride, there are these things.
Now, will they? If she wins one, do you think that they'll show it in movies?
Straight to cable. I guarantee it'll go straight to cable. Well, maybe they'll release it.
You don't know. Yeah,
you don't
hard
know.
to say.
You don't know.
Right.
But it's very interesting that's how these things take place now, which is so different from the stage work we all did when we were,
Well, I do gigs, and the gig is over in 4 hours.
Yeah. That's
so I think of the 30 years or 35 years that I did 125 gigs a year. I say to myself, do the math. Okay, and how did I do that? 6 days a week and do that young.
Yeah. Well, when we were young, you could do this. When you were young, you could go to rehearsal every night. You could perform all weekend. You could go to work the next morning, and if you missed a couple of nights of sleep, your life went on.
So what? Next?
Yeah. Well,
today. Especially, you can't go to the bar.
No, you can't. Not anyway. Well, the 4 o'clock lounge is closed.
Yeah, the 4 o'clock. Is it closed?
Yeah.
What I want to ask you. So now I know that you just did a pilot. Am I right?
Well, yeah.
We're getting to that.
We're getting to that.
All right.
There's a pilot in the works. Well, it's on this festival circuit.
Okay.
We filmed a pilot for a show called The First Ninja in New York. I'm not crazy about the title, but it's an interesting premise. It's about a Japanese family that moves into an Irish tenement ghetto, and they're immediately victimized. But they know ninja moves.
Oh, that's fun.
So
is it about the present, or was it in the past?
It's set in the late the 1880s.
All right, so it's a period piece.
Period piece, yeah. And I play a grandfather who is also victimized by some Irish thugs, and the Japanese family comes to my rescue, so we bond over that. And when we shot it, the director shot it as a short film, and he also shot it as a pilot. And it's been touring. And his name is Justin Ambrosino. He's not from Staten Island.
Not related to Larry.
Not related to Larry. Yeah. And he won the Fellini Award at the Milan, Italy Film Festival for directing this piece. And the piece has been accepted in several festivals, which are what they call pitch festivals, where they're pitching it as a pilot for a series. Wow. And so we're all excited about that.
Sure.
But
that would be My
Wow,
God.
it would be wonderful.
That's the gift that doesn't stop giving.
Of course, that's it. It's all what you want.
Right.
But this technology is so interesting. I got an email back in February. An email shows up in the mailbox. Mr. Miller, are you interested in appearing in a film that I'm producing about the prison at Sing Sing in Ossining, New York? I don't know who this guy is, you know. I wrote him back, well, tell me more about the deal. His name is Jim Ormond, and he has a very, very, very small niche. He produces documentary films about significant places and occurrences in the Mid-Hudson Valley.
Jesus.
Okay, so he's doing a documentary on Sing Sing Prison in the 1920s. It's called Sing Sing 1920s. And one of the big things that happened in the 1920s, and I had no idea this went on, one of the big things that happened in the 1920s is every year the New York Yankees baseball team would go to Sing Sing and play an exhibition game against the inmates.
Wow, I never knew
And in
that.
1927, the entire Yankee first team, now Lou Gehrig,
Babe Ruth. Wow.
I mean, Murderers Row. How funny is that?
That
when you
is
think about
Murderers
it.
Row,
Went to
yeah.
Sing
That is
Sing.
very funny.
Well,
Oh, my
and
God.
allegedly, and no one can prove this, Babe Ruth hit the longest home run ever hit during that exhibition game.
No kidding.
Because it went over all three of the fences that
they had there.
they have
Protecting-
protecting
right, yeah.
the
Oh,
inmates.
my
It was a
God.
baseball team. So anyway, this fellow found me through casting services and
Right.
places where you post your information and clips and things like that. And he said, would you play the radio announcer that calls the game and then writes an article in the newspaper about it? I said, sure. I was happy. Went up to Westchester and got dressed in 1920s clothes. And
Right.
But this is that doesn't
Couldn't
happen.
Look, you're absolutely right. Okay, the computer has taken years away from the move that you would have to make to get to the same spot.
right.
and
Everything is fast.
it's all fast and it's all out there.
like this.
They find you. You're out there. A friend of mine who was a terrific guy. He closed his restaurant and he went into. He started about 8 years ago on the computer. He was a caterer, and he just kept sending out things about catering movies.
Sure.
And he kept,
sure.
and he got the first one, and he did that, and then he kept doing it. Now he's a caterer for movies, this guy,
yeah,
and television
huge
shows
business.
and commercials.
Oh,
and
please.
he did it behind the counter on his restaurant.
Right.
While he was saying, "Can I have your bill?" Could you put your money?" And then he's doing this, and he's sending out emails
This is
to
how you do it.
and now he's in that business pretty much.
You can
do it.
develop that.
You can develop that. Okay, you have
Well,
to be
you see-
focused. You have to concentrate. But that's what he did.
You see these casting notices. I brought a clip of a film that I did, a movie, and I see a casting notice. And this is what it says. It says, man in his 60s, okay, who could play rather curmudgeonly. I love that word,
Yeah, I know.
curmudgeonly. Could play rather curmudgeonly, preferably a Staten Island resident.
Really?
That's what the ad said.
kidding.
Okay, all right. So, yes, ma'am,
Right,
here
right,
I am.
right.
And I send a bunch of stuff. I get called in for an interview, and the woman that wrote and is directing the piece is a Korean woman, and her name is Ju Hwai Kwan, and it's a piece about a relatively bigoted guy who has a Korean family move in next door to him, and it upsets him, and he doesn't want that. and through a couple of occurrences and in meeting their young daughter. I don't want to spoil the whole
No, you
piece,
don't want to
but,
spoil. I get it.
he learns
Right.
that maybe
Maybe he has to rethink this.
Maybe he has to rethink this, and
Right.
maybe they're not such bad people,
Right.
and they come to think that maybe he's not such a bad guy too.
I'm going to give you a little, we're going to put a clip on.
I rescue animals. Abused animals.
Ha!
These people eat dogs.
No, they don't.
I saw it on the video.
You should try to get along with them. They are your neighbors now, you
I
know.
don't care. That dog was barking all morning. Why do they have to come here?
Good morning.
Morning. I don't want them here.
The trailer, you're allowed to show everywhere. So it's Juhai put it on Facebook, and it got 6,000 hits the first
Wow.
week.
It's great.
You know, which is like whoa.
That's
She
amazing.
doesn't have a lot of friends, and
So
but
it got out
people,
there.
when can they see it?
Right.
After the festivals.
I see.
It has to
hit
go
the
through
festivals
the
first.
festival circuit first before they can see the whole film.
Okay. I want to mention something before I forget
Yeah.
it. When you talked about how later on they got to realize that maybe what they were thinking wasn't true, there was a study, first of all, about houses built after World War II, where the driveways were next to each other, and then the next house, the driveway was on the other side, and the driveway was on the other side. The people with the driveways that were next to each other over a 2-year period became friendlier, their kids became friendlier. But the people with driveways that were on the other side of the house did not.
Isn't that funny?
Secondly, they took an apartment building with, let's say, minorities
Sure,
and with non-minorities. And they took a test on what their opinion was of each other, what the minority thought of the non, and they let them live for 2 or 3 years together. And then within that time frame, relationships started. And then they gave them the same test 3 years later, and the results were totally different. These people were great. You got to meet, and they once they cohabitated, okay, and start
Right.
to see that everybody was pretty much living the same way, maybe just looked a little differently, okay, or reacted a little differently. They were really good people.
After my parents, probably as your parents, my parents got married right after World War II.
Right.
1946. My father spent his entire 5 years in the service in Hawaii, in the South Pacific, and they couldn't get an apartment. So they moved in with my grandparents on the third floor of their house on Van Duzer Street.
Right.
Now, down the street, there were 3 houses that were rented by the public health hospital. And the doctors were living there. And one of the doctors, you can't forget the guy's name, was Kamehameha Wang. That was his name.
Right.
He was Hawaiian,
Right.
but he didn't look Hawaiian. He looked Japanese.
Right.
And there was a lot of, bad blood.
Bad blood, sure.
And my mom used to say, they'd come home and find their laundry cut down in the backyard. They'd
Right.
find so my mom invited them over and invited the neighbors over. Said, we're all going to sit down and have coffee. And you're going to learn that these people are who you think
These
they are.
aren't. Oh, you're right.
And she loved to tell that story.
Yeah, it's a good
and,
story.
And it backs up the
Yeah,
survey.
when you really get to
get
know
them together.
exactly, it's
You betcha.
it's different.
You betcha.
That was the beauty of in my day of sociology. You didn't have all this other nonsense. You were able to talk about stuff like that without being labeled.
Yeah.
I'm not a label guy. You and I could go for about 17
We could
hours.
go.
We could have
do
the
it-
actually.
We could do a telethon. is what we could do.
Anyway, the clip is going to speak for
if
itself.
we were raising funds for something.
Good
but I
luck
don't
in your
know.
new career.
Thank you.
It's
And
really not
always,
a new career.
No, and it's always just fun that we don't see each other as much
Right.
as we should.
You're right. Well,
Get
that's our
together
fault.
and catch up. That's our own fault. You're exactly right,
Okay. Let's see.
Doctor.
Who loves you? So my guests, this particular show, I have great guests. I have never had a guest on this show that I really didn't like. I have
But
to say
never
that.
better than today.
Never better than today. But they're all good people. You know, my grandmother used to say, you don't eat that horrible food because when you eat it, it becomes part of you. And you don't want anything bad go in your body that becomes part of you.
Right. I like
And the
Grandma's advice.
Right, and same thing with friends. You know, you are who you hang around with. You are who you like to be with more often than not, because these are the people that you know are good. So my next guest is Mr. Joseph Sorrentino, Esquire.
Al the Legend Lambert, as I've been saying now for 30 years.
So let me give the people a little background.
All right, go ahead.
All right, first of all, the Sorrentino family and the Lambert/Ferrara family have been friends, and Fenari's, Jack's father was my father's partner, goes back to 1940s when your grandfather had the bakery on Henderson Avenue.
Absolutely.
And my father and my uncle were across the street on Henderson and Elm. They were across the street and a little down.
That's right.
So 45, that's 55, 60, about almost 75
and my
years.
great-grandfather was right there on North Berger.
Okay. So it's about 75 years, right? And your father, when you guys first grew, your first cars were with me. Your father, between all of you, it had to be like 35 cars over the years.
And then you got to add, when my wife married me, you started selling her cars.
Right, exactly.
And we got a few
Even
classic,
her father.
We got a few classic
I know
stories
we can't
about
say that.
Well, we could, but we have to bleep out a few
Right.
parts. There's a few bleeps in that story.
And Joe's background, for those of you who are watching, Joe is a lawyer on Staten Island here. He is you started out as a district attorney in...
Started out as an assistant DA.
Right, as
And
assistant DA,
Yeah, so I like to tell people, in the Bronx, which was in the 80s.
Right.
So if you tell kids now about New York City in the 1970s and 80s, they can't relate. They can't relate because, of course, what was going on in New York City in the 70s and 80s is totally different than today.
Right.
And all the buzz neighborhoods that were, quote, bad neighborhoods back then, and I won't mention the names of those neighborhoods, but they're all yuppie neighborhoods now.
Right,
They're all, the millennials are all
everything.
over those neighborhoods.
Right, that is all.
But I was in the Bronx when they were literally burning the Bronx down. I mean, when I was an assistant DA in the Bronx, you could travel for block after block after block, no exaggeration, and pass nothing but burnt out tenements, one after another.
I remember.
That would never be tolerated today.
Right.
But it was business as usual in New York City back then. Nobody
I
thought anything
remember
of it.
driving...
Oh, you would remember.
Yeah,
absolutely.
driving through the Bronx, driving on the highways and looking at the buildings that were burnt out and all. I kept saying, could this be true?
I'll give you a story.
I mean, it bothered
that-
me then, you know.
I tell this to everybody.
And I
This-
love the Grand... What was the Grand
Concourse.
Before that,
Well,
when it was...
the Grand Concourse, when it
like
was originally...
beautiful.
It was a Grand Concourse.
was
It
a
had a
grand-
median in the middle.
Oh, my God, it
The
was-
apartment buildings
oh,
were
my
built
God, it was
beautifully. The
beautiful.
architecture was beautiful, right?
Oh, it was beautiful.
So that's what it was intended. But I tell people this story to kind of give them a flavor of what the Bronx was like back then. So I'm a young assistant DA, and I'm working the overnight shift in the complaint room, right? So every case that originates in the Bronx has to come through the complaint room, every criminal case, of the Bronx DA's office. So I'm working from 12 o'clock on a Friday, right, 12 midnight, to 8 o'clock Saturday morning. So I'm there, and cops are coming in and out all night long, and it was super busy back then. I mean, the volume of cases was probably 10 times what it is now. So 2 uniformed cops bring this guy in, and he's dressed in sort of like scrubs from a hospital, right? So my first thought is, the cops, he must have been in the hospital, and when he was discharged, as a courtesy, the police, the arresting officers, went back to get him to bring him in to process his case. So he's telling me the story about how he got robbed, and he keeps making reference to Friday. So now I'm thinking that he's referring to the previous Friday, okay? And he was shot and robbed. So he's saying how, as he's in the ambulance, the cops stop the ambulance, they put him on a gurney, they start wheeling him through the street, this is a true story, and they tell him to point out
where what they call the perp or the perpetrator went. So as he's on the gurney and he's shot and he's wounded, he gets to the tenement where he sees the guy ran and he points it out, and the cops know where the guy went and they put him back in the ambulance and they take him to the hospital. So he tells me that back then, I don't know if you know it or not, but Lincoln Hospital was voted and surveyed as the worst hospital in the entire country. It was notorious for being a horrible hospital. The cops bring him in, and he's shot, and the doctors tell him, we're too busy. We can't take care of you. Come back on Monday. So now keep in mind, I'm working Friday into Saturday. I think he's telling me about a story that happened the previous Friday.
God.
So I say to him, well, what happened when you went back on Monday? And he looks at me with a quizzical look on his face. Like, what do you mean? And I said, when you went back to the hospital on Monday, what did they tell you? And he says, Monday didn't come yet.
Oh, my God.
And I said, wait a minute. When you keep saying Friday, aren't you talking about last Friday? He says, no, I'm talking about yesterday, because now it was like 3 o'clock in the morning.
Right. Oh,
I said, wait a minute. This happened last night? And he says, yeah. I said, you got shot last night? He says, yeah.
They told him to come back Monday.
I said, so wait, the bullet is still in you? He says, yeah.
Oh, my
He's sitting there with me shot.
Right.
The cops are with him. I said, hold on a minute. I said to the cops, come here. Get him to another hospital. True story.
No
True
kidding.
story.
That's
That was the
amazing.
Bronx, and nobody thought anything of it.
Nobody thought anything of it.
anything
Yeah,
of
today
it.
that would
But
be headline
that's
story,
a true story,
yeah.
and that kind of illustrates what was going on back
What was
then.
it? We have. I have such great time talking to my guests. I forget that we got people. Joe is since when you left, you became, you had so much experience. You became a criminal lawyer. And I know that you are also now doing other things too.
Right.
You're making a marriage of sorts with
you know
Mike.
what? Mike Minicucci, who has one of the biggest
Right.
firms on Staten Island, and Mike has had a lot of success in the commercial transaction field, civil litigation, banking,
right.
real estate. Mike and I went to college together at St. John's, and we went to law school together at St. John's.
Oh, I didn't realize
So we
that.
go back to 1978, Mike and I. Okay, over 40 years.
That's great.
And I recently became of counsel to Mike's firm. It was I guess a marriage of
good
convenience
marriage.
for both
But
of us.
you're both friends for 100 years.
40 years plus friendship. He gets to, have a in-house criminal defense attorney for his clients,
Right.
and I get to offer my clients, more of a
goods and
palette
services.
of legal services.
Now, I meant to tell you this when we first had Michael has to remember. That's how I met Mike. When your stepmom worked for Enam Boccari,
the accountant,
the
and
accountant
later
for
car washer.
Penthouse Magazine.
For Penthouse
In
Magazine.
fact, we were going in business with Bob Guccione, who you have no idea how big that almost became. So we had we built 15 houses together.
That's right.
And Michael was our lawyer.
Is that right?
Yeah,
All right.
I meant to tell you that.
there you go.
I didn't get a chance to talk
And that
to
was
him.
probably when he was still on Richmond Avenue, right?
I think it was. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was very, very early
Right.
on in his
2020,
career.
I think it was 2025 Richmond
Very
Avenue.
early. I'm going to shift gears a minute, okay, because we have so much to talk about, and now we only have 11 minutes left. So Joe and I have a lot in common because we both have two talented daughters, and I went down that road for a very long time, and Joe is still down that road. And Joe's daughter, Nikki, is an amazing talent and doing very well. So let's talk a little bit about where is Nikki now. I know we got a lot of things going on.
It's funny, right? So,
Nikki Sorrentino, years ago they tell you to change your name.
Yeah, well, you know
right
what?
now you change your name to Nikki Sorrentino.
Exactly, right? Yeah, and Nikki is her real name, so
Right.
it's not even a made-up name. But
Right.
I don't know if you've seen commercials lately for the new movie, the Taraji P. Henson movie. It's called What Men Want. But if you see that commercial, in the commercial they're singing the song "Think" by Aretha Franklin. So when you
Think?
think, that was
Okay.
one of Aretha Franklin's biggest songs.
Okay.
And
I don't recognize it by the name.
yeah.
I know a lot
you
of
would
her stuff.
know it
Yeah, if I hear it.
immediately
Yeah.
when you
Right.
heard it. And so when you hear that commercial and you hear that song, that's my daughter singing this song.
Wow.
She's actually singing it with some other girls, but the clip that they play is primarily her singing that song.
Wow, it's really
so she's
great.
got that going on. She's doing a lot of look.
Now that's in the
That's on the soundtrack of the movie.
Great.
And they happen to pick it as the song they play for the commercial.
isn't that great?
So
well, that's big time. That's exposure.
Listen, it's great.
It's all about
and,
exposure.
It's all about exposure. It's all about doing what you love. I know you had Wayne on talking about doing what you love. It's the 90th anniversary of Mickey and Minnie, and they needed a song for that. She wrote it, and they picked it. So she wrote the 90th.
They still sleep together, Mickey and Minnie?
I don't know. You don't know what to say anymore. That people get outraged.
I know, right? I don't know if the mixer and the
There'll
mini
be people
stuff.
outraged that you said that.
Now I got a pretty hip audience.
So
that's pretty cool.
So she wrote that. So she's doing a lot of things. She's writing for a lot of artists who have their songs out on the radio right now.
Great.
I could go through them.
Great.
She's releasing her own album. So the bottom line is, thank God things are going well for her.
She's such a natural.
Thanks for asking.
I'm never going to let her forget. I have a picture on my phone, which I should have showed you. And it's when she came to sing with me. And I'm thinking she came to, maybe she was on a gig.
Well, do you remember my 40th birthday party? My 40th birthday.
Right.
At the Snug Harbor Hall, the Great Hall in Snug Harbor.
Right.
You were there, okay.
Was that, maybe that's where the picture
Well,
is.
I don't know, but you were at
Right.
singing.
Right.
If you remember, I had you
Okay, that's
doing
the
live
picture.
music.
That's the picture,
And I
right.
had some other friends of mine doing DJing.
And she
right?
came up and sang
And
with me.
she came up and she sang "I'll Stand by You" by the Pretenders.
There you go. That's the picture.
And she was 8 years old.
Right, she was 8. That's the
And
picture.
she was 8 years old.
But the most important moment was when you said to me, you and Jan said, you got to let me know if this kid has talent. I think she was 5 years old. So you take her to my office, if you remember, at Villa Marin.
That's right.
And
That's right.
I had that office right off the showroom. And she's going to sing, right? Now, this is a car showroom. And you put her on the desk.
That's right.
And she
That's
sings
right.
on the desk.
That's right.
And she sang the whole song, and I go, this kid's got talent, Joe.
Right.
You know, I don't like to blow smoke up people's.
Right.
So I normally I try to say, look, there's a little talent here, you get a little bit, but I knew right away. And anyone in the business, it's like when they hear a demo, they know right away if there's talent.
Right.
They say in the record business that it's 8 seconds. Now in those days they get 100 every hour. Right, demos. So 8 seconds, 2 different piles, the re-listens and all.
Right.
So if you've been around long enough, you know right away. And sometimes you second guess yourself. Like you go, wait a minute, let me listen to that again, because there are times when you just.
And what
not
about
sure.
all the superstars who were originally rejected, and
Right.
lo and behold, years later they became
Right.
superstars?
Well, Sinatra went on the Major Bow radio show.
And he says that on the live album with Count Basie from the Sands Hotel.
Right.
His 50th birthday.
He says
party,
that on his.
and he tells the story.
He tells the story. They lost on Major Bow.
Okay.
Okay. He went on Major Bow later. After they lost, he became a star.
Okay.
Okay. He was with the Pied Pipers, and he lost on that show, and they were depressed and all. But I think it was like a year later, he made a recording that Major Bow invited them back as a specialty.
Right.
Then all of a sudden, they all became Goombas, but Major Bow blew it. There was a show when I was a kid. An amateur hour. I can't think of the guy's name. He was big. Oh, Marvin or something. Big popular amateur hour. And I went and auditioned for that. My father's sister, my aunt took me, and I didn't make it either, But I was my mentor. First of all, Nikki is amazing talent, and she's so far beyond where I was at that age, no question, because she writes, and it's a whole different genre. But I realized that I lived in New York at the time, and I said to myself, I think I could be a family man. I think I could have kids, and I still think I could sing for the rest of my life. In other words, I put singing above being a star.
Right.
I watered it down because I said I really wanted to hang around, really wanted a family. I didn't know if I wanted to go on the road, torture myself.
Right.
Even when Dangerfield asked me, and I turned him down, he got mad. But the truth is, I already had 2 kids in that big house in Tottenville. What was I going to do?
Got to pay the bills.
You got to pay the VIG.
Right.
So it was too late. So I watered it down. True, I did. But I also sang for 50. It's going to be my 55th anniversary because I lived in New York. I didn't have to leave Omaha, Nebraska.
That's right. That's right.
Anyway, but Nikki is young. She's not married. She's not encumbered. And this is her time.
Well, we'll see where it goes out. We'll
Yeah.
see where it goes out, baby.
Yeah. Now, is she any new demos or has that kind of work?
She's got
Got
albums
stuff
out.
like
She's
you
got
never
stuff
saw.
out on Spotify,
Right.
Apple Music. Though when you were telling that story, though, I got to tell you, I started to smile because You started talking about shows from years ago. I don't know how much time we have, but
We got a 4.5.
So
4.5
it
minutes.
reminded me, and this I every time I tell this story, I can't tell it without cracking up, and it's about my wife. So not whenever Bob Gigante was sworn in, he had his party down at the St. George Theater.
Right.
So we go in, and everybody's milling around the theater, and his name escapes me now, and I'm a little ashamed of that. But he's an old-time photographer, and he's covered anything and everything all over Staten Island. And so my wife can talk to anybody.
Was this years ago?
Yeah, this was when
Karen Ante?
No, this was during Bobby Gigante's
Swearing in. Right.
So I leave her talking to this old gentleman, and because my wife can talk to anybody. You leave her in a room full of strangers, she'll know everybody's history by the time you come back. And I'm wandering around, and I keep coming back, and I keep hearing where the conversation is. So as I come back, maybe the third or fourth time, I hear this guy saying to her, and I knew everybody back in the day, and I took photographs when Castro came to the UN and when Kennedy came here to campaign, JFK.
Right.
And he says, I was on a first-name basis with Walter Winchell. And my wife, who's innocent as anything, says to him,
I think I remember this.
"Oh, my God, I loved his puppet." So he looks at her and he says, he didn't have a puppet. Right, because he's dead serious, trying to impress her with who he knew, and she's dead serious saying, "Ooh, I loved his puppet," but she was thinking of Paul Winchell and Jerry Mahone. Well, this is a true story now. I was in a suit and tie that night. I swear to God, I was on the floor of the St. George Theater. I was so hysterical laughing, I didn't have the strength to stand up.
That's very funny.
As just deadpan as you could be, he says, "And I knew Walter Winchell," and she says, "Oh my God, I loved his puppet."
Well, it's so
Back in
funny.
the
Puppets
day,
are out today, except that guy. I went to see him in Atlantic City. He's
but-
terrific. What's his name? He's a comedian, and he is phenomenal.
And what about the girl who won the young girl? Who
Yeah,
won
I don't
America's Got
watch.
Talent?
Yeah, I don't watch
like
those shows
last
too
year,
much.
and
yeah.
she would
She had a
sing,
little
and she
something.
had the little.
puppet.
She was a ventriloquist, and she
Right.
had the puppet, and she would sing, and she was fabulous. Fabulous.
Right, she was.
Really,
I saw
really
her for a
talented
split
young
second.
girl.
But there's a guy, a big time comedian, and we saw him in Atlantic City a few months ago, and he has puppets. But what's her name? The one Murphy Brown.
Yeah.
She plays. She's a big actress, and
Who played Murphy Brown?
yeah, on television.
Candace Bergen, no?
Candace Bergen's father was a ventriloquist. He
That's
had
right.
Charlie McCarthy. That was his puppet, and he was Edgar Bergen.
Okay.
And a lot of people don't even realize
No,
that.
I didn't realize it till you just said
She
it.
got started in the business because her dad was a megastar. And his character was Charlie McCarthy, and he was Edgar Bergen.
Right.
And he was all over Ed Sullivan's Show and Perry Como and all those shows in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. That was her spring. You need
Right.
that spring.
Now, isn't it interesting, right? Some people can use that spring, some people can't. Just think of this. Elvis Presley's daughter, Lisa,
Right.
wanted
Never
to
could
have
make
a
it.
pop star career. Elvis Presley's daughter didn't make it.
1 minute, right.
Billy Joel's daughter. She's successful, but she's not a star.
Neil Sedaka's daughter.
John Lennon's son.
Right.
Okay.
You're right.
So it's just amazing how.
Not everyone can
Right.
use
It's-
that podium.
yeah. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't.
Oh, we got to say goodbye. This went quick. I tell you, again, it's great to have this kind of conversation.
We'll do it again, Al.
We could have
You
to
know?
do it again.
We'll do it
That's how I try to do that. I space the visits, and so anyway, I got to say.
I would have told the story about when my wife got the GMC Jimmy from you, which is a better story than the puppet story.
I got to say goodnight to my audience here.
All right, go ahead, Tom.
I want to thank everybody, of course, everybody here at the studio, and my guests, terrific guests I had today. Sometimes these shows are shown at different times, so it could be 3 o'clock in the morning. Go to bed, it's late. Go get some sleep, and I'll see you the next time you watch the Al Lambert Show. So thank you very much.
Is fast asleep. You lie awake and you think about the girl and never ever think of counting sheep. When your lonely heart has learned its lesson, she'd be yours if only early she'd call. In the wee small hours of the morning, that's the time I miss her most of all.